Welcome, everyone. Good evening and good morning to colleagues in the Pacific. Thank you for joining us at this webinar, Different Voices, One Goal, Youth Perspective on Next Steps for Childhood Obesity in Small Island Developing States. This webinar is being held in recognition of World Obesity Day, which was officially this past Saturday, March 4th, and is brought to you by HCC's youth arm, Healthy Caribbean Youth, in partnership with the Jamaica Youth Advocacy Network, the Heart Foundation of Jamaica and their youth arm, Jamaica Health Advocates Youth Arm, and the Heart and Stroke Foundation of Barbados. This conversation amongst young people about the collective challenge of obesity and overweight amongst our most vulnerable, our children, is an important one, and notably one which brings together young people from the Caribbean and the Pacific SIDS, areas in the world most severely affected by the epidemic of unhealthy weights amongst children. Our countries lacking in food sovereignty against a backdrop of complex sociocultural contexts have become obesogenic incubators, fertile testing ground for global ultra-processed food giants and their domestic offshoots profiting from the overconsumption of unhealthy ultra-processed foods, driving an explosion, if you will, a doubling and a tripling of obesity rates over mere decades. With children poised to pay most dearly, living with overweight and obesity in the most productive years of their lives, and firmly on track to develop NCDs prematurely in their 30s and 40s. SIDS, with our vulnerable economies, have much to lose in the face of inaction and much to gain if we act swiftly and decisively. The proceedings of the recently completed high-level technical meeting on SIDS and NCDs held in Barbados in preparation for the June ministerial meeting signaled a collective commitment to prioritize actions to reshape food systems through strong, healthy food policy. Civil society representatives across SIDS, led by the HCC and the NCD Alliance, produced a discussion brief, which amongst other things called on SIDS governments to place childhood obesity prevention front and center of NCD efforts as we move towards the Sustainable Development Goals. The brief and its recommendations were well received. Meanwhile, globally, the WHO Acceleration Plan to Stop Obesity, what is hoped to be a groundbreaking initiative, seeks to support 28 frontrunner countries in designing and implementing bold, evidence-based national plans to tackle obesity and strengthen treatment and care for those living with obesity. To date, 5 of these countries are from SIDS and stand to benefit from the technical support and potential cross-fertilization. So there is momentum building globally, regionally, and nationally. And young people from across SIDS are beginning to mobilize and demand action around childhood obesity and related issues of food insecurity, climate change, and mental health, to name a few. I am delighted that HCY and partners have initiated this SIDS-wide dialogue, the first of its kind for HCY, what we hope to be the first, and many more, bringing together youth voices from diverse, interconnected backgrounds, united around one goal. Thanks again to all who have joined us. You are in for a treat. I will now hand over to Ms. Sharika Mills, Advocacy and Policy Coordinator at Jayan. Sharika.
Thanks so much, Maisha. I am so excited to be here today. As you would have mentioned before, World Obesity Day just passed, and the theme for this year's World Obesity Day is changing perspectives to correct misconceptions, end stigma, and get everybody making the decision to shift from single views to shared strategies. And so I think that today's discussion, which brings together different advocates from across the region and also from another region, which is the Pacific Islands, and across different perspectives, different points of view, I think the discussion is really fitting for this year's theme. And our theme for today's discussion is Many Faces, One Goal, and we want to figure out what's next for childhood obesity. So let's go right into the panel that we have today. And I'd like to introduce everyone that's here, but also first offer apologies for one of our panelists, which is Kathleen Carew from Helen's Daughters, which is in St. Lucia. She was to speak on the point of view of agriculture, but she's not here today as she has to attend to a very important engagement. And so we'll miss her point of view, but we look forward to having other discussions that she'll be able to be a part of. So the panelists that are here today are Tayer Bulbulia, who's from the Heart and Stroke Foundation of Barbados, speaking from the point of view of sport and business. Give us a little wave, Tayer.
Good evening, all. I'm
We
happy
have
to be here.
Priyanka Lala, who is here from Healthy Caribbean. Thank you. We have Priyanka Lala, who's here from Healthy Caribbean Youth and who's also a UNICEF Child Rights Ambassador in Trinidad, speaking from the point of view of climate change. We have David who's here from Let's Unpack It in Barbados, speaking from the point of view of mental health. We have Elizabeth Kite, who is here from Take the Lead Tonga, from the Kingdom of Tonga, here representing from the Pacific Islands for the point of view of youth advocacy. We're so excited to have Elizabeth here today. We also have Alex Johnson, who's here from the University of Technology Association of Dietetics and Nutrition students, speaking from the point of view of nutrition, and Alex is from Jamaica. All right, so let's get right into the discussion because I know we're all excited to hear what you all have to say today and to figure out some action points for when we go after this, because this is a conversation that's been happening in this region. You know, how can we come together instead of having single views and single strategies on how we should tackle childhood obesity? So I want to ask all of you first to tell me exactly how your sector aims to improve the health of small island developing states. And I want to start with Tyre.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the question, Sherka, and good evening, all. Certainly a pleasure to be here. It's been a minute away from you guys, but certainly a pleasure to be back. And Happy New Year to everyone. So sports, and it plays a critical role in advancing health and developing health strategies and developing persons to become more healthy. As we know, in the Caribbean and in our many small island developing states, we have been impacted heavily from the health crisis. Before we go there, we have to understand where we're coming from. Small island developing states have been put under tremendous pressure for years from the slave trade, all the way till now. And countries who have benefited from us, small island developing states, have gone on and developed on the backs of us. And when you look at the history, you have to understand the context of what is taking place today. So when you see stadiums being built and programs being built in big countries, first world countries like England, we often say, well, we need to become like them. But the reality is they built on the back of us. And now we're facing the consequences of what they did and what they would have done to us, facing these crises. So we see, and I'm sad that my colleague from St. Lucia couldn't be here to speak on agriculture. We see the effects on mental health. David in his space doing that, the mental trauma on persons from generation to generation. And when you link it back to nutrition, where my colleague Alex is coming in from, his impact of how the slaves were fed and how our previous generations were fed. But now we need to consider looking at alternatives to developing, because it's not just plain and straight from where we come from. So when we look at sports and the development of sports, we have to understand the context of where we're coming from. When we look at business, we have to understand the context of where we're coming from. So today we see those effects, but we have to develop strategies to reach our people, to reach our communities who are impacted the most from it. So I believe that sports has a critical role to play in this, but in our conversation, I want just for us to understand where we're coming from, to understand where we're going, because oftentimes those big countries and first world countries look at us and say, look, y'all just have to develop. But we have so much challenges to overcome in order for us to develop. So I hope my point was clear. I know the 2 minutes is pretty short, but I hope it got through in the end.
Thank you so much, Tyre. And Priyanka, can you tell us from climate change, how does climate change, how do climate change advocates work to improve the health of small island developing states? Because as Tyre was just mentioning, we have a lot of unique challenges. So while we can appreciate our unique cultural perspectives and identities, our challenges are unique because of, you know, our size or geography, the way our populations are set up. And so tell me from the perspective of climate change, how your sector works to improve the health of states.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. And climate change is absolutely a daunting threat. We currently are in a code red for humanity. And in the Caribbean, we are uniquely affected by the climate crisis, as well as we have unique contributions to how we as small island developing states have contributed to the climate crisis. In recent times, we've experienced heat waves, droughts, and changing precipitation patterns with increased rainfall, often off-season. We see flash flooding, and we see extreme landslides, rise in sea levels, and coastal erosion. And these are just some examples of crises that affect our daily life and our society in a variety of ways. Climate change is a major threat to our people's health, and I think there's definitely a disconnect between understanding the climate crisis and how it affects various sectors, including health. We see it with education, with sporting, with health, and with every sector. And there are so many layers of affliction where we can see the impacts affecting at different levels. Children and the elderly are affected by heat waves and dust, which can be linked to heat stroke and respiratory issues, for example. Communities are affected by floodwaters, which can contaminate water supplies and damage crops. Another example is floods create create havens for disease-carrying insects and rodents, leading to increased incidence of infectious diseases such as dengue. And these are, among other things, showcase the inextricable link between planetary and human health. And undoubtedly, the implications of climate change also affect citizens' access to healthy and nutritious food. For example, we saw in the COVID-19 pandemic the rise of non-communicable diseases, especially with diabetes and obesity being at the forefront. And this was due to a lot of families in the Caribbean having to rely on faster, more affordable, accessible meals, which unfortunately were fast foods and more processed foods. And we also saw the linkage between this and the climate crisis. For example, in Trinidad and Tobago, when we are hit with a natural disaster such as flooding, we see our young people taken out of school. We see families struggle as belongings are lost, homes, property, jobs are lost. And this results in having to change our diets, change the way that we feed children and the access to healthier diets. And a lot of the time it's filled with GMOs, sugars, fats. But the correlation is not seen between climate change and health, especially with long-term solutions and how things can be implemented to ensure that we have infrastructure and resources to ensure healthy eating and healthier diets are provided in extreme circumstances. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Priyanka. That was really interesting. And I know Alex probably has something to say as well about, I was wondering, Alex, if you could comment on what Priyanka was saying about it just being harder over time for the people that you may also be seeing to access healthier food. Like, is that something that you've also recognized, that over time it seems to be harder for your patients to access healthy food?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. So firstly, for me, I'm sorry that our colleague from agriculture couldn't join us because her points are critical, but let me see if I can support her with agriculture and nutrition. But it's very important because climate change now has affected how our crops grow. So we are not getting anything from our country, and I can speak specifically to Jamaica. We have lost a lot of the stuff that we would have grown naturally, and now we have to be importing stuff. We don't know what is in it, and we have been advocating for front of label food packages. We have been advocating for school nutrition policies, and these are the reasons why, because availability to healthier foods are becoming harder. It's becoming harder, and that's just the reality of it, because the system is being created that way so that persons turn to the convenience foods like our fast foods and our tin items and our quick ready done stuff that are from an Americanized system. And Tahir brought up some very good points earlier. We have moved away from cultural eating, and we have now moved to a more urbanized, a more Americanized diet, and I realized it's not just in Jamaica but right across the region in our Caribbean. Persons are moving from eating, I would have a piece of yam and some ackee and saltfish. Now I'm going to get some KFC because I don't have time to peel the yam anymore and to pick the ackee and to cut up the onion and all of that. So we are moving away from our cultural food items, and now we are being pushed into this Americanized thing. And this is why we are seeing a higher prevalence of childhood obesity.
Thank you so much for that, Alex. To add to that as well, in the Jamaican context, at Jamaica Youth Advocacy Network, something we've also been discussing, and just in the general space, in recognizing that there's been this kind of change in our diets, this has also been posited as maybe one of the reasons that we're experiencing the uptick of violence in schools and some of the increasing mental health issues among young people. And that's something that we've been exploring just in our space as well, how those things can be linked because of our changing diet over time. And so I was wondering as well whether David could jump in on that and tell me that as well in response to the general question.
Thanks, Sharika, and thank you so much to the partners who are leading this particular session. And good evening as well to my fellow colleagues. Very interesting discussion so far. And I am very happy to be here representing the mental health perspective, which is too often left out of the conversation as it relates to health. I think generally as a Caribbean and certainly as a global South, there's a lot more work that we need to do in the area of mental health, in the area of mental health awareness and advocacy. And so if you ask me what exactly drives our advocacy at Let's Unpack It, it's the idea that every Caribbean young person, every child in the Caribbean should be able to enjoy the highest attainable standard of health and wellness, and inclusive in that is mental health. And so answering specifically the last question that you posited about the uptick in violence and mental health challenges in our schools, I link it not only to the diet that our young people are being fed, but also to a range of other challenges, including the socioeconomic challenges that are being faced in the homes, including the fact that as a Caribbean, we have not mastered or even a basic level of mental health literacy, to the point where we don't discuss it, to the point where we do not understand the coping strategies, we do not have enough services and programs available. So I think definitely there are a myriad of factors which are linking to the uptick in mental health challenges and mental illness seen amongst our young people. And I think what we are calling on CARICOM governments, Caribbean governments in general to do is to increase their action. I think one of the major things that caused me to get into the field of mental health advocacy was an abysmal response to what happened during the COVID-19 pandemic. What I realized was that we had a press conference every single day, but only one of those press conferences was about mental health. Only one of those press conferences told young people how they could get connected to help. I believe that if we polled young people who are attending this particular session and you ask them, where do I go for help? Who do I call? They do not know. And so when we talk about diet, when we talk about health and wellness, when we talk about childhood obesity prevention, we have to include mental health in the conversation. And here's why. Because if young people are having socioeconomic challenges at home and they come to school, they haven't eaten, they're not eating the appropriate diet, and these things manifest at school, the quickest thing we can say is, oh, the young person is challenged. Oh, the young person is problematic. But no one gets to the root of the challenge, which is, hey, I have a socioeconomic issue and I don't have enough support to handle that. So if there's one thing that I hope everyone will take away from this particular conversation, it's that we need a holistic approach to health and wellness in the Caribbean. It is no longer sufficient to have the siloed approach where we do a little agriculture over here, we put a few counselors in our schools over here and hope that something sticks. We need a comprehensive plan, not just at the level of our individual nations, but comprehensive in terms of a regional approach to addressing childhood obesity, yes, making sure that young people can attain proper diets and so on, but also to attain that holistic sense of health and wellness, which includes mental health as well.
Definitely. Thank you so much for that, David. And as we're speaking of young people and mental health and nutrition, I know that Elizabeth has something to say here, because as we can already see, young people are already at the forefront of the conversation. We're having this conversation today, which is the first of its kind, and a really important discussion to have, as we know, coming out of HCC's recent discussion paper, which highlights that there needs to be further collaboration between and among SIDS in resolving the issues that we're facing. And so I want Elizabeth to speak a little about how young people can continue to be at the forefront of the advocacy and how we can continue to include young people as we go along in this space.
Thank you, Sharika. Thank you, everyone. It's so wonderful to be here. I'm already really impressed with just all the really incredible work being led by young people in the Caribbean. It's very inspiring to see. It's something I really would like to see more of in the Pacific. So it's nice to learn from you all so I can kind of come back and take it to my youth leaders here and encourage them to know that it's actually a cool thing to do, aside from it being absolutely necessary. So yes, it's absolutely necessary that we continue to further engage our young people. I'll just talk a little bit about the work that we do at Take the Lead and how we help to address, obesity. Sorry, just to get into that, while you guys were talking, I was just thinking, here in Tonga, it's actually International Women's Day. So happy International Women's Day. And I bring this up actually because the highest rate of obesity in Tonga is actually among our women, unfortunately. And as we all know, our women are actually our nurturers of our young. And so I wondered while I was listening to everyone talk if there was a link there with the increasing effects of, the increasing rate of young people. But anyway, back to youth. At Take the Lead, we really focus on education. That's our primary focus, to educate young people to be the catalyst of positive change in their communities. And through this, they can then disseminate the information it is that we offer them into the communities that they come from, which is the most effective way. It doesn't quite make sense for us to be going into these various communities and kind of preaching to people that don't know who we are. In Tonga and in the Pacific, relationships are very important for us. And so we gather the leaders within these communities and who already have established relationships with their people to then disseminate the information it is that we want to give out. The information we get, of course, we're not professionals in this field, we're just the advocates. We partner with our Ministry of Health, who really need all the help that they can get. And so we're really happy to help them in pushing out their message. The other thing in Tonga as well is, I think this might be similar across the board. When our healthcare professionals speak to our people are quite scared. They'll tune out because it's a little too serious. So if you get people like our youth leaders to come in and make it a normal conversation to be having, people warm towards having those conversations, which we need to be having more of. And here, I would have to say that here in our area, in our region, we're really more in that educational part, educational phase, because this whole conversation is actually very new to us here. And so, yeah, I'm learning from everyone here on how we can actually have more of these dialogues back home. I hope that actually clarifies what we do here. Oh, just to add on, sorry, I left out a point. Aside from educating and equipping our young leaders to have these conversations, we further advocate with our leaders. We have very good relationships with our national leaders and in Parliament to further improve policies that exist right now to better access for our people to have, healthier food options, lower cost, and things like that. So, yeah.
So definitely hearing lots of similarities with the issues that we're facing, as we know. And as you said, you said you have a lot to learn from us, and we're already learning so much from you. So thank you for being here, and thanks to all of you for the answers to your questions so far. So I've learned that basically, we need to look at the historical context to see where we're coming from, to know where we're going. It needs to be an intergenerational approach to this issue, of course, with young people at the forefront, as we already are. But then also we need to take a step back and look at how we can bring the issues together so that our resolutions have more impact. And so the discussion just now, thank you guys so much for that. And I hope it's not too much to ask if you can give me one word to describe the context of childhood obesity within your region or within the country that you are from. I want Tahir to go first. I know the discussion was a lot, but can you tell me one word or maybe one image to describe childhood obesity in your local context?
Well, the one word is kind of difficult, right? But thankfully, we're positive with the policies that are being implemented. So I would say it's a train that is moving at a good pace. I don't know if I made sense.
Okay, and that's related to more so the advocacy around childhood
Correct.
obesity.
Exactly. I'm gonna side with David and go on the positive route. There's too much negativity around it already. So it's a moving train.
All right, so much Tahir. Priyanka.
I think I would say widespread. I think definitely looking at small island developing states, we can see the impact of the climate crisis and the daunting threat of it becoming more apparent. And as young people, we not only hear about climate change, but we see and feel the effects of it on a daily basis. And we need to make the correlation between the climate crisis and health, especially with mental health, with physical health and our well-being. So we're definitely seeing it become more widespread, but at the same time, as Tahir was saying, also having the positive side of how we can use this as an opportunity to mobilize as a Caribbean region and come together to create solutions for our young people.
Thank you so much. Widespread. All right. I want to remind our participants that you can always use the Q&A feature to ask questions. We want to also have this discussion with you guys. So feel free to use that function and we will get the answers to our panelists so they can answer. David, your one image or word.
I think my one word would be upsetting. But I'll follow up by saying, yet unsurprising. And I say that because much of the challenges that we're seeing manifesting in the Caribbean, in small island developing states, is due to a lack of policy, a lack of strategy. There's a lot of what I like to call pitchy-patchy work being done. Something comes up, and we try to plug the hole rather than going and finding a holistic solution to the problem. And so that's why I say it's unsurprising. And as an advocate, I think what will continue to drive our work is that urge to make things better. And so, yeah, that's my answer.
Thank you, David. Alex? Your one image or word.
All right, so let me say first, and I speak from the point of nutrition. It's sad. That's my word. It's sad. And the reason why I say it's sad is that more than 30% of our Caribbean adolescents are overweight or obese. Over more than 30%, and this is the CARICOM study in 2017. I know that has drastically changed, even past COVID until now. So my word is sad, sad.
Or image, you can describe an image as well.
I didn't catch all of that, Sharika, but I assume that you came to me. Okay, yes, so thank you. I agree with all my fellow panelists and their words, 100%. But for me, I'm an optimist. And when I first thought of this, it is really hard to capture childhood obesity into one word, but I did think of the word empower. And, that just explains the real need of empowering not just our young, but also our families to choose healthier ways to live. And also, empowering through education, but also not just the need for further empowerment, but to acknowledge the current existing efforts, like all of you are leading right now, that's really helping this movement. So empowers for me.
Thank you, Elizabeth. If I could go back a little, Priyanka, when you were speaking, you mentioned that we're in code red for humanity. What does that mean? I wrote it down here and I'm just realizing I had that question for you. I don't know if anyone in the audience was also wondering. If you were wondering, give me a raise hand or something so I can know. But Priyanka, what does that mean?
Yes, so the Code Red for Humanity is something that was said by the United Nations last year and by Antonio Guterres, and it's basically describing the current climate crisis on a global scale, looking at the different nations and how we're seeing the effects of the climate crisis, especially in regards to global warming, heat, and the rise in temperatures on a more global level as well. And the Code Red for Humanity is also something that was specific to the Caribbean region due to our unique location, our unique also impact towards the climate crisis, how we as small island developing states contribute, but also how we are uniquely affected and impacted. So it basically encompasses how our nations are feeling and seeing the effects of the climate crisis. And it's described arguably as the most daunting threat of our generation.
Oh, okay, thank you so much for that. All right, I think right now all our panelists are really ready to hear from the audience. And so we have a question that we're going to put in the chat. And I'm going to ask Samika, who is the advocacy officer at Heart Foundation of Jamaica, to take over this section and lead for us. Over to you, Samika.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. And I am just so excited about everybody coming on this platform this evening. I'm always so happy when I can hear youth voices come out and speak volumes. It's positive. I think good things about my son. I'm not so worried. So I want us to take a look at, well, good evening to the audience. I know you guys are being quiet, so we want to involve you in the whole aspect of the discussion as well. And we've been talking about the different aspects of childhood obesity and what affects childhood obesity or what influences it. And I was especially excited when Elizabeth spoke about the child bearers, because my specialty area is lactation. But we're gonna get the audience involved, and we want you to tell us what sectors do you think should be involved in obesity prevention and management. So there is a link that was placed in the chat, and we're just gonna ask for you to click that link. What it will do is take you to a little page. You don't really have to put in any information, and you're just going to start typing different sectors, and it's going to give us a nice, wonderful little word cloud that we can use as a little souvenir at the end of the session to let us know where our headspace is and who we should actually get involved in the whole movement against childhood obesity. So we want to see which sectors do you think are most important in childhood obesity and prevention management. So we heard speaks from person speaking in terms of sports, person speaking in terms of mental health, talking about climate change, talking about nutrition. So what sectors in your country, in your region, in your area, do you think we really need to put the pressure on in an effort to control this childhood obesity that we have as an epidemic going on right now? So if you're having any issues to log on by just clicking the link, you just type in the chat and let us know. But it's simple. We did a troubleshoot. Just click it and then start typing some words, and we're going to start seeing some awesome stuff pop up on the screen. So just think about those things that you think should have a hand to play in controlling childhood obesity. There we go. We see some words popping up. So Community Health Unit, Ministry of Health, Health Promotion Unit. So we're talking about the government. Right, food manufacturers, awesome. policymakers. Yes, mental health is a big aspect of it. The education, farmers, awesome. Have some more things going on. Who is directly involved with childhood obesity? Who do you think we need to put the pressure on to reduce this condition that is happening? Who do you think needs to play more of a role in ensuring that our children are eating what they're supposed to be eating, so that we can have a healthier population, a healthier society, healthier adult population? Because, you know, the children, of course, are the future. This is looking so pretty. So we definitely want to keep this as a souvenir, and not just to look at, but so that it can inform us of the different sectors that we should actually, you know, put the pressure on, speak with, get them involved in the conversation. They shouldn't just be sitting from afar, but we want them to play a hand. Trade and industry. Somebody said all the sectors, healthcare, of course. The youth, yes, we are trying our best. The entertainment industry, that is interesting. I think that's the first I've actually seen anybody bring the entertainment industry in this conversation. And that indeed is important. And we probably should explore that. I'm putting that in your hands, Jayan. We really should tackle the entertainment industry. That is so true. Somebody said parents. Can somebody type it so that we can have it on there? Somebody put it in the chat, but can somebody just type it so that we can get it on this word cloud? I see finance, great. Education, of course. Bureau of Standards, great. All right, yes, somebody put parents. Housing, all right. Thank you for the person that put parents, right. So this session is actually just 5 minutes, so we're gonna wrap up soon, but anything that comes to your mind that you really think needs to be involved, just continue to put it there. And of course, we'll be sure to share this on our social media pages so that we can keep in mind what we expect from the other players to tackle this childhood obesity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Simika, and thank you so much to all the participants. I thought that was really interesting, particularly to see that even industry was on the list as the persons that need to get on board. And I think young people are very clearly saying at this point that we will no longer sacrifice our right to health for industry's profit, right? We're no longer interested. And so it was really interesting for me to see that, you know, Bureau of Standards, especially in Jamaica, we know that's part of industry as well, to see industry there so clearly. All right, so thank you for that. And I want to move back to our panelists. So clearly there needs to be this whole of society, intergenerational, intersectoral response. We need government, we need private sector, we need civil society to be involved in this, and we need consumers, just the everyday people, to be involved in all of the issues that we're facing, right? And particularly for childhood obesity, as you know, that's really why we're here today. And I want to ask Tayer first, how can you see your sector working with any of the sectors here, or maybe multiple of the sectors, to address childhood obesity?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And I absolutely agree with the point that it's a whole of sector approach. It's no one-dimensional approach. And that's a culture we have in the Caribbean. It's like we have a saying, Elizabeth, in the Caribbean, putting square pegs in round holes. But we can't continue to do that anymore. So sports has an integral role to play in this. Obviously, it can come as a proactive step and also as a reactive step. And I would more lean on the side of the proactive measures, because we know in the Caribbean as well, we often do things based on reaction. When something happens, when something blows up, then we look to deal with it. But sports can play an integral role, especially at the grassroots level, dealing with children, and it does not have to be in competitive sports, but recreational sports, for example, just physical activity, participating in it. The benefits of sports and physical activity are immeasurable. It has links to mental health. When you play amongst a team, how does that make you feel? When you are participating amongst your peers, you have friendships. And then now when you're participating in sports, it's linked to agriculture as well, because you have to consume good, proper foods. Similarly, it's linked to climate change. Climate change has big effects on the grounds we have in the Caribbean. So we need to create green spaces that our youth can come and participate without getting injured. So for example, there was a study from the University of West Indies on the impact of climate change on sports. And what the study was saying is that our grounds, due to the infrastructure within our grounds, and within our stadiums and what's not, our athletes are getting injured, and this is linked to climate change, as Priyanka mentioned about the heat waves and what's not. The impact of that is having on our athletes, for example, and it trickles down to our kids, because who wants our kids to go and play when it's not safe on the grounds that they're supposed to be playing on? And that's a really practical example. But similarly for nutrition, there's the nutritional element to it. So sports can play a pivotal role, and we have to understand the context of it, as I would indicate, and it's a culture. We're trying to break a culture here, years of hardship for people. So we have to now begin to take the steps of changing the mindsets of people, which is extremely difficult. And what he says that we have to take the steps now. This year, Barbados will be celebrating 56 years of independence, right? 57 years of independence. And if we don't take the steps now to change what has happened for the last 57 years, if we don't take those steps now, it will continue for the next 57 years. So we have a role to play, and it's a whole sector approach, it's a holistic approach, and I'm glad everyone is saying that, and we need to now take that forward and take that initiative forward to transform in every sector and bring every sector to the table, but not only bringing them to the table, but having meaningful discussions and meaningful action when you go away from the table. That is even more critical. So sports has an important role to play. The benefits are immeasurable, but we all have to come together to understand each other, because if Alex is just focusing on nutrition, climate change, David on mental health, we're going nowhere. We're just going towards a different direction. So if we can come together, different voices, different voices, one goal. You understand it? So we're here. So I think that's the role we have to come together, and I'm glad we're here. And I just want to make a point, one final point to Elizabeth as well. What I've realized in this space is that we think issues are unique to a particular region or a particular country, but we have so much in common throughout the world. That's how small the world is. That the same issues Elizabeth is facing in Tonga is the same similar issues we're facing here. But what we have to do is come together, as she indicated, to learn. So she has solutions that we don't have, and we have solutions that she may not have. But this is why conversations like these are so critical. But we have to take the next step to take it to the people that need to hear it. So it's like the gospel. Alex, my brother Alex, Pastor AJ, I see his status every day. So we have to take it to the people in the communities that are impacted the most.
Yes, definitely. And one of the important points that I'm taking away from what Tiger said is that basically when anyone gets into the room, we have to be willing to bring the other person in the room too. So when any of us gets a chance, we have to give the other person's agenda or fight a chance as well. We have to be willing to work together in that kind of way. Because I also heard you connect what you were saying to every other aspect here today. So thank you for that. I'll go right to Elizabeth. I can bet you have a lot to say here about, how you can basically, bring what's here to your region and how we can learn from you guys as well. So you can go.
Thank you. Yeah, that's an excellent point from Tahir. We can really exchange a lot of knowledge on how to improve and tackle all the problems, which include climate change. I'm really passionate about climate change, so I really love your points that you're sharing, Priyanka. But yes, that exchange of knowledge is really essential for us, like I was saying before. These are really new dialogues happening in the Pacific, although this problem's been ongoing for some time. So it's really great to see the Caribbean take the lead, and we can learn from you guys. But again, just coming back to the question of, how can we see our different sectors working together? Like similarly to what Tahir was saying, everyone plays a really critical role in addressing this very complex problem that we face. We can only tackle it entirely if we have everyone on board, from climate change to mental health to sports. And otherwise it's just impossible to really achieve the goals it is that we have to tackling this problem in particular. But yeah, I think I'll leave it there because I am very conscious of time. I think I've made my point though, and the importance of exchange of knowledge and also engaging our leaders better and working together collaboratively.
Thank you so much. David, can you jump in here? How can you see you over in mental health, working, connecting with some other sectors on childhood obesity?
Thanks, Sharika. And I do want to share the sentiments of Tahir and Elizabeth as it relates to that level of youth engagement that is required, especially as it relates to building out policies and strategies that can be useful in tackling childhood obesity. I think there's this notion that young people are not engaged. And I definitely disagree with that. I think that characterization comes from the fact that so often we're one-dimensional in our approach. So young people are over here doing one thing, another group are over here doing one thing. And I think there is a requirement for more synergies to be built. I imagine that young people advocating in Barbados and Jamaica will be launching campaigns simultaneously and getting on the ground simultaneously. And it means a lot when we can come to the policymakers and say, this is not just a Barbados issue. This is a whole of Caribbean issue, and this is what young people want. And once and for all, dispel that narrative that young people are disengaged, that they don't care. I heard recently a minister made the comment that young people need to make more noise for this particular thing so that he can ask for more funding. And I thought that was quite unique, because here it is that we have a situation where ministers don't necessarily invite young people to the table, but yet we're demanding of young people that they get out there and do the action. And so I say, well, we'll do it. Let's get together. Let's band together for action. Let's bring together our recommendations and say, hey, put your money where your mouth is. And I think I do share the sentiments of Tahir, where we have a problem fundamentally in the Caribbean with implementation. There's a lot of talk, there's a lot of signing on to action plans and international policies and so on, but so little is actually done at the end of the day in terms of execution. And I think there is room for young people to hold our policymakers accountable in terms of implementing the policies that we want to see. And it's also important that we have representation at that level. I want to see more young people in our parliaments. I want to see more young people having a hand in actually writing the policies, reviewing the policies, contributing to the policies. And I know as well, one of the other challenges we have is that yes, government may try to roll out some policies or they may circulate documents, but then young people are not necessarily engaging. Young people are not necessarily, responding and giving the comments that are necessary sometimes. And then as well, we're not necessarily, we'll debate online, we'll share the pictures online, but we're not necessarily ramping up for action and actually getting on the streets and mobilizing. So I think we do need to have a more structured approach generally to advocacy in the Caribbean, where we draw the synergies across sectors, inclusive of mental health, and I must say that. But I think as well, coming back to the initial point that Tahir made, a shifting of attitude. And I think that's what takes time. The intergenerational conversations need to happen. We need to stop saying that, young people don't care, or that, older people are the problem. I think we need to find some way that we can meet in the middle, have a conversation, and design strategies and policies that work together for all of us, so that every single Caribbean citizen, every single citizen of a small island developing state can enjoy that right to health and wellness.
Thank you so much, David. So it seems what's needed is more of a change in perspective than anything else. And so I want to hear from Priyanka now. Tell me about how you think your sector can work with another sector to tackle childhood obesity.
Absolutely. Well, as we know, climate change is an encompassing issue which targets all industries and all sectors. And from what I've been hearing in the conversation thus far is intergenerational collaboration and youth engagement. And I know for a fact that I'm 16, I'm still in high school. And when I talk to my peers and I talk to youth from other schools, a lot of young people are passionate, they understand the issues that they're facing, and they have a unique perspective to bring to the table in regards to the solutions that they want to see. But the issue here is a lot of the time we say we want young people to come to the table, but unfortunately in the Caribbean especially, a lot of young people don't know that this table exists or that they have the right to be at the table, and more importantly, how they can get there. So definitely opportunities and promotion and the resources need to be provided to ensure that young people are aware that they have the right and how they can get their voices to be included and participate in discussions like this and see the meaningful action happening, not just having young people there for the sake of it, but having our perspectives be implemented into the policies and the decision making. And a key way to do this is through our education systems, especially with the COVID-19 pandemic. It was highlighted that a lot of the time we relied on parents and guardians in the home to teach kids, but a lot of the time parents and guardians are not equipped with the skills or the knowledge to teach their children all these skills. So for example, with green skills, this is something that can be implemented easily into our school curriculums, and even looking at the connections between our school curriculums and sports after school activities, working with the cadets and reshaping the Red Cross, going back to all these different organizations for youth engagement and giving youth the platform to a safe platform where they can learn, they can engage, and they can also be part of the solution. I think also this can be seen with mental health as well. We can definitely see the correlation between climate change and mental health, and of course, health, climate change, and mental health. So definitely programs can be provided to support young people, make them aware of the issues, but also provide support before we see the challenges happening, have infrastructure in place before we see the problem, so that we don't keep repeating and we don't keep seeing the same challenges over and over again, but we target the solution from the roots. And definitely this looks at intergenerational collaboration, but not including young people when we're finished with the policies, including young people to create the policies from the beginning.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think it's so unfair to then come and say young people are so disengaged when you never tried to engage them in the first place or from the beginning, you know, and really some more advocacy for, you know, meaningful youth engagement from the beginning. And so, Alex, I've left you for last because nutrition is really at the center of what we're here to talk about today. And so definitely this is, the question that you will answer is the main question that we're even here to decide today. You know, how can we, how can you as a nutrition professional, but also I am thinking as persons who advocate for healthy food policies, you know, nutrition in that aspect as well, how can the connection be made with other areas, and how can we really bring other areas into
Okay, thank you. Thank you for preempting a whole world of stress on me there. But, you know, I'm happy to realize that persons are understanding how critical it is, nutrition is. But when I say how critical nutrition is, I'm not pushing out my colleagues and to say that their areas are not very important also. Because, for example, when we look at Tahir's passion and his baby, which is sports, we have to understand that nutrition, proper eating, and exercise is married. Without the proper eating and exercise, we won't get the results that we need. And then we look at a patient who is depressed, or they are suffering from some form of mental challenge, depression being one of the major ones. I don't think we understand how serious depression is. And then we realize persons stress eat, and that is one of the leading problems or underlying conditions of the whole obesity crisis. So Dr. Johnson, and I purposely said Dr. Johnson because I want us to understand that medicine is evolving, and doctors are no longer just stuck in the usual thing, but we're now branching off into different areas and into, you know, holistic medicine. And then where Priyanka is have a critical role with her climate change, we can't eat nothing if we don't have the right weather. We plant the stuff, and if the weather is, the climate is not conducive to the crops, we're going to suffer. We're going to have food insecurity problems. And then we're looking at the advocacy where Elizabeth is standing for or standing with. If there is no proper advocacy for these different policies, because, you know, it's so unfortunate. I've been to so many meetings, so many table talks, so many discussions about wonderful things that are going to happen. But I want to tell you that it ends right in the meeting. The exuberance, and I just leave these meetings disappointed over and over and over again. So even in Jamaica, where we have now introduced a school nutrition policy and we are pushing it, and we see where Jayan is going all over Jamaica and sharing the good news, as I like to say, of nutrition. So, you know, we have a holistic approach that we must take. We cannot look at it at one thing. Yes, nutrition is critical, but all of these factors, it is multifaceted, and we run into the different areas. And through many discussions throughout a period of time, I have been, an interest in mental health has been sparking, and I think I'm going to do some graduate studies in psychology, because I'm seeing where, I know David would be happy to hear that, because I'm seeing where nutrition is being affected greatly by mental health, and I don't think we understand that it's not just that I don't want to eat healthy. I cannot eat healthy because I'm burdened with so much problem. And I cannot eat healthy because when I eat healthy, I'm not losing weight because I have no sporting activity in my community. I have nowhere to run. I am not safe to run up and down and to exercise. And if I go out, the place is so hot, I'm going to drop dead because the climate change problem. So there is so much angles that we can look at it from, and I believe that nutrition, yes, being one of the center parts, we have to collaborate with all the persons here, and that's why I'm so excited about this panel, because this shows us very good job for whoever put together this group of brilliant young people. I think this is a starting point where we need to start collaborating. We're going to be talking to David Moore and Priyanka and Elizabeth. Me and Tyre are always talking, and we're going to see how best we can get stuff together, get the thing off the ground, and start working.
Thank you so much for that, Alex. Elizabeth had to step away for another engagement, and she sends her apologies, but also very important engagement that she really could not miss. So I will apologize for her, and I see Tyre's hand up, so you can go ahead, Tyre.
Thank you, Sharika. And coming after Alex is a bit hard because he's put it into context so well. I just want to make 2 points. Going off of what Priyanka would have mentioned, it can't just be a form of tokenism when we engage youth. You have to put your money where your mouth is. If you're investing in youth, invest in youth. And don't come to say we don't have the resources or we don't have the money to back the youth when they get in position. Back them, and you'll see the results. Trust me. So the second point is that when it's linked to agriculture, on what Alex would have mentioned, and I'm going to talk about the mindset. When we talk about mindset, look at our Caribbean countries. Our food import bill is extremely high. Extremely high. We have gone away from sustainable living. And this goes back to my initial point on how they have ingrained in us years and years of generation of trauma upon us. So much so that we have to depend on them. We have to depend on the West. It's easier for us to import from Miami than it is from Barbados to Grenada, or Barbados to Guyana, or Barbados to Jamaica. So when I talk on mindset, and David speaks on mental health, these are the challenges that we face and that we have to break down to get to our people to understand that they have a role to play. They have to take the initiative on growing what we can eat and becoming more sustainable, because yes, the cost of living is high, but in COVID, we saw that the cost of living for our families can come down because we were forced to go and plant in our backyards. Alex talks about that every week we speak. They were forced to go and plant in their backyard. And what does that do? That improves climate change because now you're growing a green space around your house. What does that do when you're out planting? That helps in mental health. So imagine if we can encourage our people to understand the importance of sustainable living and change that mindset on depending on the supermarkets where the prices are high, or depending on the government to make changes, or depending on your politicians to make a change, or depending on somebody else, on the US. If something happens in the US, like what happened in Russia, we are not even close to Russia. We're not even close to Ukraine, but we've been impacted from the crisis. Why should that be happening? We need to start changing our mindset and our focus to then implement these strategies, and it's all interconnected, as Chelsea is saying. And we have to become more sustainable in the way in which we operate, and then we'll see a lot of the crises start to break down. As I mentioned in a previous forum about last year when we were on the radio show here in Barbados, imagine our for how much we spend on NCDs is over 350 million on an annual basis. Imagine if we could cut that in half through agriculture, through sports, through different programs. Imagine where that money can go. And yes, we hope that I don't go any politicians, okay, but we hope that it can then be implemented into programs and strategies that we can become more proactive in the way in which we operate. So those are just the 2 points I wanted to make, piggybacking off of Priyanka and Alice. And it's all interconnected. And we're showing that more and more that it's interconnected, and we're more connected. We have more that brings us together than differentiates us. So we need to go on that mission, that we have more together and can put our differences aside. We will have naturally, we are real people. David will tell you real people will have differences, but how do we deal with those differences? Don't let me deal with how our forefathers taught us to deal with differences. That, oh, we can talk to David because David don't agree with what he said. Or because Alex is this, Alex from this place, this community, we can't talk. We got to change that notion now. So yeah, let me be the change and move forward.
Thank you for that, Tayer. Okay, so I have heard about 3 people on this panel so far say that they have been in a lot of conversations where there has been lots of talk and no action has come out of it. And so now we want to move to that space in our discussion. So we're really clear on how exactly we can work together. We're clear on how our issues come together in a theoretical sense. But now I want to ask if you could tell me 3 things that you think we can do to prioritize action around childhood obesity in your context. But first, before Elizabeth left, she left me her responses. And so I'll read her responses first before I go over to the panelists that are here. So Elizabeth says that we need education for families. This unit is the foundation for us all and where our young people first learn about health and well-being. Secondly, we need education, like Priyanka was saying, and this information should be taught in schools, so in our curriculums. And lastly, we need to better engage our leaders to help improve policies and laws. And those are 3 very good action points that I think we could take from in all of our aspects to that common goal of reducing childhood obesity. So now I'll turn over to David. What do you think we can prioritize to address childhood obesity? What are some of our action points from here today?
Really good points made by Elizabeth, and I want to start on the same train. I think it is easier to get into a space of advocacy and action when one understands what is the impact. And so I think a lot of dots were being connected today that are not being made for the average person. We go into our polyclinics and we sit down for 4 to 6 hours waiting to see a doctor. That is useful time that you could spend reading a brochure. It's useful time you could spend hearing a PSA about mental health and about childhood obesity and what we can all do to prevent such. I think what we need in terms of action moving forward, first of all, is an aggressive awareness campaign on health in general. And I think we can break that down specifically into mental health, specifically into childhood obesity, etc. I want to see us take it as serious as we took the matter of HIV and AIDS. That is the most common example that we use in terms of the health space to say that was effective. Everyone understood it. I remember I was in primary school and we had coloring books. We had the workbook that came in the newspaper that also had a lot of information about how you could prevent and how you can get treated as well. So I'd love to see that kind of integration as well. In terms of at our schools, I want more programs. I think if it's one area we fell down in is the lack of programs in our schools. I remember as well, primary school, road safety program. You had a program about drugs and awareness. You had programs about how to deal with anger. We don't really have that level of programming in our schools anymore. And especially when we have a situation where our guidance program is not up to standard, one of the things I would love to see is a complete overhaul of the health and family life education program, so that our students are not just leaving school with a CSE in English and a CSE in math, but life skills that they can apply, that they can understand, hey, when I'm in a crisis, this is where I go. If I need help in terms of coaching on what I should eat, what I should be buying, here's where to go. There's valuable information available within my school system, within my teachers, within the actual programs that are available at school, that I can, use that in my actual everyday life. But I think one of the most crucial elements moving forward is more advocacy. And I don't mean the kind of performative advocacy where we just get involved in an organization because we want something extra to put on our CV. I think this is a real issue that we're facing in terms of a health crisis in the Caribbean. I think that we need to realize that it is our right fundamentally to enjoy health and wellness. So no more, I will eat KFC till I'm 60, and then when I get to 60, I'll change. I'll only go to my doctor when I am in pain. We need a complete transformation in terms of how we look at health. And I think that the advocacy space can do a lot, not only to bring awareness, but again, to hold policymakers accountable. That if you tell us that you care about young people, then you must care about youth mental health. If you tell me that you care about young people, you must care about putting in the policies and strategies that help us to prevent and to manage childhood obesity, right? So I'm not sending you to Parliament for you to tell me I don't have enough money. I'm not sending you to Parliament to tell me that you can't walk and chew gum at the same time. We elected you to be able to solve the problems. And it's not that you're doing it alone. We want you to involve every single citizen. If you involve us in the process, then you have access to a variety of information and recommendations that collectively can create a better society, a more healthy society for our young people and our children to grow in. So those are my 3 tenets: education, programs, and then more advocacy for the sake of accountability.
Thank you so much, David. I want to remind our participants that they can ask questions using the Q&A feature. Shelly, you don't have to ask your question again in the Q&A feature. I already got it from the chat. But if anyone else wants to ask a question, it's fine if you put this in the chat, but you can use the Q&A feature as well. So I'll go to Priyanka to tell me the answer to our question. 3 areas that we can prioritize, or 3 action items for childhood.
Yes. So I definitely agree with the remarks made by Elizabeth and David, and specifically looking at green skills, as I mentioned before, basic skills that can be integrated into the lives of young people, real skills that they can take back to their homes, back to their daily lives, that will have a meaningful impact on their life, impact on their carbon footprint, and other challenges related to climate and health. And also, for example, I actually did an initiative with Healthy Caribbean called Eat Green, Live Blue. It was during the pandemic, where I encouraged young people and children to plant their own home gardens or kitchen gardens. And this was with the goal of inspiring healthier eating and just having an activity that can be done to get you outside and something to take you out, get moving. Also, this was a cost-effective solution and something that would also reduce your carbon footprint. So there are so many elements to a solution like this, just household-based. And with solutions like this, when our young people and children change their habits, the whole household changes. Their parents change, siblings change, and therefore the community as well. And I think it's also important to, again, highlight the fact that we need to see this more in schools, school programs, school networking, and ensuring that children and young people are receiving the information and the solutions from school. Also in regards to the household, looking at women and girls and their role in the solutions. Realistically, women and girls are the homemakers. They create the home, they support the family, they decide ultimately what the meal is at the end of the day and at the start of the day, and they should be given the information and the resources to help create healthier diets, healthier eating systems, and also infrastructure should be placed for, as I said, before we see the challenges happen, infrastructure should be placed. As I mentioned earlier, with natural disasters in Trinidad, we need disaster relief programs and disaster preparedness, specifically looking at climate change. When the volcano erupted in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we saw a lot of donations from different islands, sending a lot of canned foods and a lot of foods that could be sustained over a long period of time. And while this was definitely necessary for the first week or few weeks, we saw this prolonged longer than it needed to be. So we saw the connection between the climate crisis and also that resort to the prepackaged GMO, high cholesterol foods, but this was prolonged because there was no long-term solution and no long-term infrastructure provided for the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And this is a trend that we see in Caribbean islands as well. The lack of preparedness for different issues that arise related to the climate crisis. And this is something that we see with all sectors, climate and education, when natural disasters happen and children are taken out of schools, when natural disasters and climate affects health, mental health. So definitely that holistic approach of not just, as we mentioned collectively, not just targeting one issue, but seeing how all these issues are integrated and having meaningful solutions that can be taken to the households, taken to schools, and be implemented, that are cost effective, easy for our young people to implement, and really mobilize that change, rather than having this outlook that it's a daunting threat, having the outlook where we feel empowered and we feel motivated to be part of this change because we're inspired and we see organizations like this, young people, advocates like this pioneering the change. Our young people will feel motivated and inspired to be part of it and demand more action from our policymakers and our governments.
Thank you so much, Priyanka. Tahir, can you tell us the 3 action items that we should prioritize for childhood obesity?
Thank you so much. And after David and Priyanka, I don't think there's any more solutions. Number 1, for sports, related to sports, I think there's a definite need for a Get Into Sports campaign throughout the Caribbean. So Get Into Sports would be 1. I think education reform is also key. Education reform, David spoke to that really, really well. Education reform, I think, should be at the forefront, but it's a tough thing to do. It's a transformational thing to do, and as we know, in the Caribbean, people like to stay away from the difficult topics to have. So I think educational reform is absolutely critical as we go forward. Also, number 3, I think there needs to be more collaboration between our youth organizations, that we can work together. Partnerships. If we go together, we will go much further. I find oftentimes in the youth space, no matter whatever, not health, sports, whatever, we tend to try to bring down one another. But if we can bring up one another and work together, because David has an audience that I don't have, and I have an audience that David may not have. So imagine if we come together and those 2 audiences blend. Imagine how much more of an impact it would have. So I think that can be a straightforward action item that we can work towards in short order. And I think that can be an action thing coming out of this meeting, that we can work together on all of our projects, just as we've done here tonight. Something as simple as this, also moving forward, that we include more persons within our strategies or within our projects, and go away from that notion of working in silos. And as we often say, we have to be the change that we want to see. So we want our persons that are in decision-making positions currently to work together, but are we working together with our youth within our youth space? And quite more often than not, we're not, but we have to work together, because just the other day, and I'm glad Chelsea is here, we were talking after the National Youth Awards, and I was telling her a lot of the people I didn't know. That was the truth. And there's a National Youth Awards in Barbados, and I'm pretty sure a lot of the people in there didn't know me or Chelsea either. So it shows, it's testament, and it's a fault of all of ours, and we need to look within to see how we can get to know more about each other, and that's how relationships and communities are formed. There can be no unity, there can be no community without unity.
Thanks for that, Tyre. Alex, your response?
Why did you guys put me after Tahir? I'm literally, listen, I'm here and I'm just starstruck. Feel like I met one of my biggest fans this evening, one of my biggest celebrities this evening, because I'm just so edified by the session. But my solutions are simple. I'm staying within my domain because everybody has brought forward some really good topics. But for me, one, I don't believe in reinventing the wheel. I believe that policies are already there that we can push and maybe upgrade or revitalize. So for me, the first solution is a school nutrition policy. And this is something that we need, we want it now. I have to use the vernacular. We want it now. We need the school nutrition policy to be implemented now. Our school feeding programs has to be standardized, because many times the only solid meal a child gets for the day is at school. So we now have to optimize the nutrition that the students are getting at that time, because we have so much control over them in the school setting. And for majority of our lives, we are at school. We're tired of school now, but we have been at school for such a long period. And during that school time, we are under the care of our school administration. So if the lunches are healthy, I'm telling you that for the 2 days we are not at school, we're getting majority healthy meals. When the children go home, they must say, "Mommy, I don't want that," because that is not what teacher give me at school. And they're going to know that something about this meal is not substantial. Then we're looking at the sugar sweetened beverages. The taxation, this is something that Heart Foundation is doing. Heart Foundation is pushing for the sugar sweetened beverages tax. We need this. We're seeing diabetes as one of the major killers. When we're talking about obesity, we're looking at a whole myriad of conditions, because obesity is a precursor to all of these NCDs. So when we are packing our bodies with all of these sugary beverages, we are drinking these corn syrup. I like to just tell the people as it is. You're drinking a bottle of corn syrup. You're drinking that corn syrup, your poor pancreas is in distress. You eventually, in couple of years' time, because, you know, Jamaican people like to say, you know, when you kill me, fat me. And them like to put it that something have to take me out. So we have to be very careful that we are not promoting, you know, I have one life to live, so let me just live it and enjoy it. You have to be very careful of how we take care of this one life. And the last point is the front of label food packaging. I don't know how many times I'm going to push this thing. I think if I say it one more time, somebody's going to change my name to front of label. We need to get the front of label food packaging in effect now. And I'm not speaking just in Jamaica, I'm speaking across the region, because we're talking from a Caribbean perspective this afternoon. We need to have the consumers knowing what is in the products. You cannot be telling people to eat healthy, but there is no education surrounding it. It took me a whole year of nutrition, principles of nutrition, to fully understand a food label, to the point where I'm able now to educate patients. How am I going to teach a patient in one sitting about a food label that took me a year with science background and all of that to interpret. So we have to look at it from a practical perspective. People will not stop eating the foolishness if they don't know what they're eating. So if they see these black octagonal warning labels, high in salt, they're going to know that Dr. David tell them at clinic that me not supposed to eat no whole heap of salt. And me hear Sharika on the TV promoting that I must eat foods low in sugar, and when I see high sugar on my food package, I am not going to purchase that item. And this is going to push the consumers into reformulating the products, because when they stop selling, we know all these industry people work, they work from money. So when these persons are no longer able to make these products and to make money from these products, they're going to reformulate them. So we need to push for a school nutrition policy to be implemented, not just in Jamaica. I want to see one in Trinidad. I want to see one in Grenada. I want to see one in St. Lucia. I want the school nutrition policy to infect the region like COVID. And then I want this sugary sweetened beverage taxation. That's a must. And then we want our front of label food packaging. We need it now. I said it in my quote that we are digging our graves with our forks. And we're going to see life expectancy falling. Persons are going to be dying very young because of stuff that they could have avoided by not living a certain type of lifestyle. So those are my few points.
Thank you so much for that, Alex. I'm stepping in because I think our wonderful moderator, Sharika, might be having some internet challenges, but what a fantastic panel. I know that was our final question, but before we go to the Q&A session, does anyone have any final thoughts they'd like to share?
Most definitely. I think I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, not just because of the topic at hand, but because there's so much vigor and passion amongst Caribbean youth to find solutions and be the solutions to the challenges that we're facing. I came across a quote recently, and we see it on TikTok all the time as well. Nobody's coming. We are literally the change that we want to see, and it's really up to us to implement. It's really up to us to advocate. It's really up to us to change the lifestyles that we're living so that future generations and current generations as well can enjoy health and wellness. I think it's so important as well that as we have conversations about non-communicable diseases in terms of prevention and management, that we must include mental health. Mental health as a cause, mental health challenges as an outcome, as a consequence. And I think it's really important as well that we can start small. We can start in our schools teaching our young people how to cope, where to go for help, what signs to look out for, as well as how can you support your friends going through particular challenges. I think the importance as well of addressing bullying, which is something that we haven't been able to tackle in this conversation, but linked to childhood obesity, is the very real consequence in terms of bullying, cyberbullying, challenges with self-esteem and body image that we often don't talk about, and we say things in jest that can actually cause someone to go through a lifetime of trauma. So I think it's so important that as we build out the Caribbean region that we want, where young people and children can enjoy health and wellness, that mental health is right up front and center in terms of that conversation. And so I just really want to say thank you to Sharika for moderating, as well as all of our partners who have brought together this conversation, as well as our learned panelists for their contributions. Thank you.
Okay, I'm so sorry about that just now, guys. I'm not sure how many of you have already given your final comments. Was that just David so far? Okay, all right. So Tyre, we can jump right to you.
Yeah, I just want to thank the organizers for putting together this excellent webinar. I think it's critical, and we need to continue doing our work within our spaces and continue trying to work together to achieve the goals that we want to really achieve. If we go together, we'll go further, trust me. And with that, it's just short and sweet. Just want to big up David, continue pushing. We see the excellent work that you do within the mental health space. Priyanka as well, in the climate change campaign with the Ashley Foundation. We watch you closely there, and AJ. week in, week out, my brother, preaching the gospel of health and nutrition, man. So keep it moving. And to the team behind the scenes that often don't get the recognition, Danielle, Sherka, you name it, Maisha, pick up yourselves. Kudos to y'all for putting together this week in, week out. We know it's not easy, but continue pushing and continue striving. And we are just happy to be a part of this esteemed panel. So thank you and be safe, and let's continue continuing.
Thank you, Priyanka.
Yeah, I'd also just like to say thank you to the organizers and the panel today, and thank you, Sharika, for moderating the session. And I'd just like to reiterate one of the points made by Alex, that we don't need to reinvent the wheel, and we don't need to come up with completely new solutions and inventions, because the policies and the solutions already exist, and they're so easy to implement, especially on an individual level and through our communities and through community outreach programs. There's so much that we can do on the grassroots level, especially addressing marginalized groups, lower socioeconomic levels, and even in Trinidad and Tobago, looking at the migrant groups and looking at all the sectors who are affected. I think also I think so many important and critical points were made today, not only looking at each of the sectors, but holistically, and looking at how each of us has a major role to play with our different groups in mobilizing change. So now I think from this session, I would love to see some action put into play and really see what we said today being put into meaningful action. Thank you.
Definitely, thank you. And Alex?
Firstly, I'm just honored to be a part of this panel with these wonderful young scholars, if I may put it like that. I just sense excellence, and it's really promising that our future is set. These are the persons that are going to be speaking not very long from now on these same issues and being the forefront personnel for these issues. So, it's really a pleasure sharing with you guys. For me, and my closing thought at all these events, let your food be your medicine and your medicine become your food. If we understand that principle, where we are not just eating to survive, but we are eating not just to survive, but to survive and be healthy. And health is not just having muscles and six packs and all of that, like people like to, being healthy is not being slim, or that's not healthy, but being healthy mentally, being healthy physically, and the space in which you're existing, a healthy space, where Priyanka will speak on her climate change, etc. So all the points that were brought up this afternoon were excellent, and I believe that the multidisciplinary approach, the holistic approach, is the only way that we're going to solve the pandemic of obesity. Did I just say that? Yes, the pandemic of obesity. And I believe obesity is more of a threat than COVID-19, because you cannot wear a mask and stay out of obesity's way. You can't lock up in your house and isolate and not become obese. Obesity is an illness that we need to start working on, because we are looking into a future that is a fat future. Unfortunately, we're looking at a fat generation, and it's something that I am so concerned about, but it's only going to change when we as the future get up and start putting pen to paper, and not just pen to paper, but start opening our mouths, using our hands and our feet, and making these things a reality. Reality. That's what we're pushing for, a reality. God bless you all. Thank you.
Thanks so much to all of you. But the final comments will actually go to whoever, or maybe multiple of you who have a response to Shelley's question. So Shelley's question is, if there are any cultural norms that you think contribute to the issue of childhood obesity, and if so, what can we do about these cultural norms? Do any of you have a response to that question?
I think Alex would have made mention before of our whole approach to health and wellness in the Caribbean. This idea that it is only something that we need to consider in the latter part of our lives, something that necessarily we aren't really given every opportunity to realize. And so I think what really needs to happen is that we have a shift, that we realize that, hey, moving matters. Even if you're taking 30 seconds of exercise a day, the studies show that that has tremendous impact, not only on your physical health and wellness, but on your mental health and wellness as well. So I think that shift in attitude in terms of how do we put measures in place and how do we engage in strategies on a day-to-day basis where we can be well, we can encourage our family members to be well also. But I think that also flows over into our attitude towards policy. It flows over in terms of how are we going to keep our policymakers accountable to make sure that, hey, when I go in supermarket, if I have to, that I can afford food. How do I make sure that we have the land and the space available that we can plant gardens, that we can make our own food? So I think, yes, there needs to be some kind of attitude shift and some cultural shift in terms of our perspective on health. That is something that we deserve, and it's not something to be considered down the line.
Thank you so much for that response, David. And that was the only question that we had today. So thank you so much to Shelley for asking that question, and thanks to David for the response. So before I turn over to Daniel to conclude our session, Daniel is the advocacy officer from Healthy Caribbean Coalition and is just an amazing organizer every single time. And before I turn over to her to conclude the session, I just want to mention of the action items coming out of this, because all of this discussion really comes down to these few points that I think I've made here. And I'm really eager to see maybe if anyone else in the audience, if you have any additional points that came out from the session that I did not mention, you can definitely go ahead and put that in the chat. All right, so here I have that we need more advocacy and collaboration between the organizations. So we need to be speaking on each other's issues, and we need to be connecting the issues for people each time. That in our public education campaigns, we need to be making these connections for people because they may not necessarily be able to make these connections. And rights events recently where there was just soda being served as, you know, a beverage option. And that was really interesting to me that connection wasn't being made from that perspective, when, you know, the important point that Elizabeth would have made earlier of women being the persons to suffer the most from obesity in the Pacific region, being just, you know, a really important, interesting connection that was made here today. That we need more programs in school, because in schools, that's where we have all the children. It's a regulated environment, an environment in which we can ensure that they are getting all the things we think is important for them to get, including the information that's important for them to have. And so these programs need to be centered in the school environment. And I think finally, the combined strategies that Priyanka was mentioning, and so that Eat Green, Live Blue campaign, I think is so interesting because it resolves so many different issues. And so by planting more things, you got to go outside, which increased your time outside and just the effects on your mental health. And I thought that was so interesting how we could resolve multiple issues using that one strategy. And I think that can be something that we think more of even as we design our campaigns and advocacy strategies going forward, how we can include multiple areas to be resolved through one activity possibly. And so thank you guys so much for that discussion, and over to Daniel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sharika, and to our panelists for a fantastic panel. I'm going to echo Sharika's sentiment and in asking everyone what your nuggets were, because there's so many nuggets of information that our panelists shared today, and we want to hear from you. And bear with me as I'm going to try and tell a story based on quotes from today's panelists. So we described obesity as widespread, upsetting, yet unsurprising. Policymakers are using a pitchy-patchy work approach. But we have a train of advocates who are driving powerful advocacy guided by a rights-based approach. Yet, Young people don't know that the table that they should be sitting at exists. And so we need policymakers to put your money where your mouth is, prioritize young people to create the policies from the beginning, build infrastructure before we see the problem, and collectively, we need to undergo complete transformation of how we look at health, recognize the importance of sustainable living, exchange of knowledge and working together collaboratively, empowering of young families and helping them choose healthier ways to live. Build more synergies, band together for action, shift attitudes, emphasize changes in perspective, target solutions from the roots, and more advocacy for the sake of accountability. Those are direct quotes from our panelists today. So kudos again to our panelists, fantastic discussion. And just from my end, our governments have yet to plan or yet to develop a plan that integrates all of the things that our panelists spoke of today. And our panelists have shown that this is possible, and they have made those linkages. So this approach was also used and amplified in the discussion paper prepared by HCC and other civil society organizations in SIDS in preparation for the January 2023 meeting that has been mentioned throughout the webinar today. And so we hope that policymakers take heed, especially as you heard, there's a June 2023 SIDS meeting coming up. So all the advocacy, all the power that I'm hearing coming from the advocates, we need to build up to that momentous occasion in June. And this is my call that not only do we have youth sitting at the highest level, but also consider having them meaningfully engage in the solution building. You heard from them today. They have the solutions and should be part of that conversation. And I'm hoping beyond the key takeaways from today that audience members, we take lessons learned here, that our actions in our own sphere of work can have implications and can strengthen and advance the work in other sectors. So given our low resource settings in small island developing states, these innovative solutions, which we discussed today, and perspectives are exactly what we need to hit our targets for 2030, whether those are sustainable development goals or action on obesity through the STOP action plan. And the theme for World Obesity Day, as Sharika said from the very beginning, was to change perspectives. And I think by having conversations like these, we can continue to do that, broaden the conversation, move beyond siloed action, and we can continue to contribute to shifting the narratives and solutions around our obesity. Our children deserve that and so much more. So beyond this conversation today, we're hopeful that we can grow a network of youth across small island developing states who are keen to keep this conversation going around NCD prevention, treatment, and control, and are passionate about seeing change. So we'll keep you posted, but I'm keen to hear if anyone is interested in that network. You can let me know in the chat. So a huge thank you to all of our allies who are on the call, who continue to amplify youth voices, to our moderators, to panelists, the whole HCC, JAN, HSFB, HFJ, JAIA teams for their support and bringing an idea that we had to fruition. And special thanks to our tech team, Janae and Carrie, for their ongoing support behind the scenes. Thank you all, and looking forward to seeing you again. Take care, and we'll definitely continue to have these conversations.
There's just one thing, Danielle. If everyone can on their mic give Danielle a round of applause. Danielle does not get enough appreciation. David, on your mic. Alice, on your mic. We want to hear the claps. Danielle, big up yourself, Danny.
And thank you to all of you for making this happen. Have a great rest of the day for those of you joining from the Pacific, and to all of us in the Caribbean, have a great night. Thanks, everyone. Chat again soon.
Cheers. Take care, everybody.
Bye, everybody.